What if all the messes you're trying to fix and all the things you see as life or someone else doing you wrong are just showing you what needs fixing in you? I know. Let's get into it. Welcome to Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan. I am so happy you're here. I know this is hard to hear. No one wants to be like, "Oh yeah, of course it's all my fault. Of course, my fault that all these things are happening and that I hurt like this and that someone hurt me." Wait, how is that my fault? I hear you. But I want to talk about something from my perspective in all of this mess and what I've learned since leaving someone and truly hurting them and hurting me, but doing so in my mind with the justification that there was things that they did wrong to me. But at the end of the day, the more clearly I see my journey, the more I understand that there was things in me that I needed to fix. Wow. And that's what I would love to share with you today and maybe help you in those moments where it feels like the world is against you, things are falling apart, whether it's a relationship, a job, friendships, and you're like, why is all this happening to me? Why are these people doing me wrong? And sometimes we have to flip the script a little and go, what do I need to work on myself to have these things not continue to occur? And that's always hard. So let's get into it with you a little before you get so angry at me. So, through my journey, those of you that have been listening along, all you great people, you know how hard it was for me to really hurt someone that really mattered to me so much, my ex husband. And going through that process, I remember this song, Megan Maroney, Fix You Too. I listened to it far too many times. And the song starts by just listing all these things like the roof is leaking, this is happening, and I don't want to have to fix you too. And then it says, you're a fixer upper if there ever was one, and I need some work myself to tell you the truth. I don't want to have to fix you too. So for a long time, I really, at the beginning, held on to that song thinking, yeah, I can't fix him. I don't want to fix him too. And I started learning through my divorce how much I needed to fix myself. But then take it to the next level. I really learned it's not that I didn't want to fix him. That's all I ever wanted to do. All I ever wanted to do was fix him, to make him not to do all the things that I thought would make him happier or a better person and feel better so much. Not that he was a bad person, but maybe if he changed these things, he would feel better. But one, that's not my responsibility to fix anyone. And two, there's no possible way to fix someone else. And I'm not here to say he was broken, but what I realized and what I came to the conclusion is that I needed to fix me, but I didn't want to admit it to myself. I didn't want to do that self-reflection. So I was distracting by focusing on the things about my husband that I thought needed to be fixed. Wow. It's crazy to say it out loud because it's so easy to put the blame on someone else instead of looking within. And it's like, well, they did this. And if they would have stopped doing this, everything would be great. But the truth is, but everything can be great when you make up your mind for it to be. And I know that sounds a little way off, but hear me out. It's just like the same idea if you don't love your job because you don't like all of the people that work there, you're not really great with the hours or the culture, but you're like, if I get this promotion, I get this raise, I'll like it. Then it will be good. At the core of that job, if you don't like all the things that the job really is, the situation that you're in. You don't like all that. The hours, like the promotion and making more money isn't going to make you like all of the things about that job, but you just think, well, if I made more money, it'd be worth it. We just kind of justified like when we get somewhere else, we'll like it more. We can't just be in it for what it is. We have to be aiming for, well, if this changed, then staying would make sense. But maybe we just don't even want to be there. In my head, I was trying to fix how I felt by thinking, well, if my husband changed this thing, then I would be happier in our marriage or how our relationship is. And maybe that could be true, right? When you're having those honest conversations with someone. But the reason we even got this long in our relationship, like this, the things that I wanted to fix, quote unquote, or change about him weren't new. They'd been there the whole time. I known this man since he was 19 years old, and I suddenly just expected that they would change, even though logically they had been there for over 10 years. That was a me thing. That was a me thing. I knew it, but I wanted to stay there, and I chose to. Whether consciously or subconsciously, I stayed because it felt safe and it was known. And obviously, I did care about this man very much and still do to this day. I probably worry more about him than I should, and I haven't spoken to him in 2 years. That doesn't change, but not in the same way that I once did. And I think sometimes we have to realize that it's so easy to put your focus on, or not even just your focus, just it's so easy to see what needs to be fixed again. I don't really like to say people are necessarily broken, but just the improvements that people can make in their life, let's say. It's easy to see that about everyone else. You're like, "Oh yeah, if they would just do this, if they could just do that, they would be great. Yeah, yeah, they should do this." But to say that about yourself and go, wow, I really need to do this differently. Wow, I really need to change this. That, now that is where the courage comes in because it's a two-parter. You actually have to have the self-awareness to go, wow, I could probably change a few things about me and I'd be happier. And that would help my relationship, my career, my happiness. And you could probably identify them if you get to that place to self reflect. But to actually start implementing the changes and habits to get there, that's a whole other beast. And give me this, just think about a time you've ever wanted to make a change or knew you should make a change in your life, how hard that was to just change the habit, unless you really, really, really wanted it. Like if you just know you should change it, probably, but you're kind of okay where you're at, you probably won't change it because there's not that much of a need or emotion behind it. So that's why you're the only one that can change you, because you really, really, really have to want it. So when someone else is just reminding you all the time of something that they want you to change, it's not really creating any desire to change in that person. If anything, it's creating resentment in the relationship. And that's what I did. I think it's a vulnerable truth that we can all relate to when it comes to relationships. Sometimes we mess things up subconsciously because of our own baggage, our own issues, our own insecurities, our own I'd hate to say traumas, but triggers from things that we haven't worked yet in our past, and we haven't worked enough on ourselves to know how to navigate when those arise. And I look back at my marriage and reflect on so many times where I would make something bigger than it needed to be because I didn't like the way I felt. And it had nothing to do with him. I wasn't a jealous wife, so it wasn't necessarily that. It would be other things. If he wasn't matching what I expected to feel in that moment, and it took me back to a place where I felt unseen or whatever it was, he didn't know he was doing that to me, and I didn't know how to communicate that. But it made me feel that way. And he never was intentionally doing that. I do believe that. But I also didn't have the self-awareness to know what was happening. I just only knew how to be upset or sad when I didn't feel like I wanted to feel. And we do that in life a lot. Instead of just like, why is this actually bothering me? We just want to get upset because it seems easier. And we don't even ask ourselves, why am I so frustrated about this? And then not only why am I so frustrated about this, but now what about what's the best case scenario now? I was thinking about it the other day. I was driving downtown, I had somewhere to be. I'm in Nashville traffic, if you know, you know. And there was a ton of construction. And right when I'm not going to be too late right now, but right when I'm almost there, this guy comes out with a stop sign, construction worker. And he's like stopping because they're literally lifting a whole window on a building. It's like not a quick stop. They're putting a window on a building, and I'm like in front row seat, and all these cars are turning around. They're like leaving, but I can't. I'm in the front row, no turning back. And I'm like, I'm literally almost there. And now I'm going to be a lot more late, a lot more later than I expected. And there was an inkling in me to be like upset. But then I was like, do you think he's going to move the stop sign because I'm losing it in my car? No. Do you think suddenly that's just gonna happen? Do you think my day is gonna be better if I get angry and flustered and upset right now because of me getting this great view of a window getting put on a building? It just was what it was. And I sat there and I used the time that I had to myself to do a few things that I'd probably been procrastinating anyways, and I just made the best of it. And I know that can sound cheesy, but it's such a better way to stop and go, why am I about to get upset? And how is that going to benefit me? If you ask yourself those two questions when you get upset, I swear, it just kind of puts you in a place where, and breathe too. Why am I so upset? And how is this going to benefit me? I would say almost 9 times out of 10 about these little things especially, it won't even matter. How much nicer would that be to just not? And in my relationship, I look back and there's a number of times I could have prevented my feelings from being overwhelmed. But I learned it a little too late for my first marriage, at least, how to better regulate my emotions. But it's absolutely so important, not just in a marriage and a relationship. It's a transferable thing to all things in life. Everything in life is about how we perceive it and how we manage our emotions and our reactions to things. Whether it's you being an entrepreneur and navigate new business opportunities when things fall through, or when dealing with your parents, or toxic friendships, or a boss that you just absolutely cannot get on the same page with. If you're not able to self-reflect and you're just difficult to communicate with, it's just not ever going to be simple for you. And it's going to be kind of miserable if we're always just getting up upset and we're in a hurry, we're blaming everyone else. I think about one thing that happened a lot in the corporate world and even in life and friendships is when we decide to throw someone under the bus instead of taking ownership ourselves or personal accountability. And I'm sure you can think of a time where you were talking to someone and something didn't get done, whether it's your kid, your boss, your best friend, someone that you know or that you kind of like. And instead of them just taking ownership and be like, yeah, I dropped the ball, they make it somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's fault. And that's kind of what I was doing in my marriage. Let's be honest. I didn't want to look at what I was doing. So I was just like, oh, yeah, if he would have done this. Instead of just saying I was trying to throw him under the bus, and not to other people. I never spoke badly about him or our marriage to people. So really this is just me in my head subconsciously blaming him because I don't want to see all the things that I need to work on. So in my head I'm throwing him under the bus. This is hard because of him, not me. And this was more in our marriage. Once we separated, I let go. By the time I asked for the separation, I was well aware, well, not up to the level I am now, but I was aware that he's not going to change and that's on me to leave. And I took all the blame from him and I did put it on myself. But I didn't realize what I was doing that while I was in the marriage. So since the separation, I have been able to do so much self-reflection. But in the marriage, I'm telling people now, so hopefully if you're in this or in this relationship or in a place where you're constantly blaming your partner for everything going wrong, it might be time for you to look within before it's too late to realize that you've been creating a lot of resentment that's not necessary because you're not willing to look at yourself. And so is that is just one of those things. But what I'll say is throwing people under the bus is just not ever going to serve you. So I think if we can own a little bit more of where we dropped the ball, and then instead of focusing on how everyone else dropped the ball and everything in life, again, not just relationships, it just becomes easier for us to move forward. If it's not your fault, then you're not fixing it. It's like, oh, it's Joe. He did it. I don't really know how he's going to fix it, but it's not my problem. But when we own it ourselves, then we can start seeing what's the solution here. And don't get me wrong, sometimes the solution is, in my case, I had to leave because I wasn't in a place where I could fix what needed to be fixed, staying where I was. And I was what needed to be fixed. And I don't think that's always the case that you can't do it within the relationship. But I know that was the case for me. It wasn't until I walked away from everything I ever knew and the blame of all the things that I thought I could change about him that would make everything better. Oh, if it was just this or that. Even if he did it, if I was still in this loop and this pattern, I would have found something else because it wasn't about him. And it wasn't about what he was doing. It was about where I was, and I wasn't happy with myself anymore. It's hard to say because even sometimes we don't want to admit when we weren't happy in life because I mean, it's easier to just be like, everything's great, it's fine. And I was definitely the person that did that. And I don't even think I knew how sad I was in it. Because I was just going through the motions. And people that knew me in the marriage, I never once said how unhappy I was. And I wouldn't even, like, again, I wouldn't say that I was like, oh, I'm so unhappy. I definitely wasn't one of those wives. And I didn't have that mindset sets. But when I step out of it, it wasn't, I was unhappy because of the marriage. I was unhappy because I didn't even know who I was. And I was doing everything in my life because I thought that was what I was supposed to be doing. if I wasn't going to follow all the rules of the church, at least I was gonna like follow some of society. The corporate job, the wife, the cooking, the cleaning, the house, the things. And I was falling in line with all of those things, but I didn't really know myself. I was just so focused on being busy and showing the outside world or trying to prove to them, whoever them is, that my existence was enough, that I was supposed to, that I had worth, that there was worth in me. And I know now I don't need to prove my worth to the world or anyone else. You don't either. But I know that we often feel like we do. And that can get us wrapped up doing a lot of things that aren't really in our hearts, but we just feel like society expects us to. We have to do this. We have to be this person. We have to, don't do this because people will think this. Don't act like this because people, all of these things that we get conditioned to feel and think as we, as children, basically, from teachers, our parents, all those things, they just carry with us. And I don't think we often enough get to stop and go, where does all this pressure come from? Oh, yeah, because I learned that I wasn't going to be good enough unless I made a lot of money. Oh, I felt like I wasn't going to be this if I didn't look like this. Oh, if I'm not married, if I'm not all of these things, it's so much external weight on us. And it doesn't really, it's really just if that's not what you want, I, I think it's more courageous to just follow what feels good. But it's so hard when you get in that cycle. And I'm sure you, unfortunately, most of us can really resonate with that, like feeling like we've got to be worthy enough. And we tie our worthiness to a million different external accolades. And it's rough. I'll tell you, it's rough, but it but when you finally look in the mirror and start seeing the things about yourself that you want to work on, you realize you want to work on them for you and not for anyone else, which means you care about yourself enough to go, gosh, I really, maybe you don't think you really love yourself. Maybe that's hard for you to say. But if there is ever a moment where you're like, I want to work on these things, that in itself is you demonstrating that you do love yourself. So if you're in that place in your life where you're doing that, I love that for you. And I want you to know that that in itself is the first step to recognize that you do actually see worth in you, or you wouldn't even try to improve. That wouldn't be a thought, right? I think it's kind of like what they say about parents. Like if you think, oh, am I a bad parent? That means you're a good parent because a bad parent wouldn't even think like that, right? So it's the same with yourself. If you're even worried about improving who you are, then you know that you have worth. So that's just like a great first stepping stone because you want to make your life something different because it makes you happy. And when you want to do that, it can never be about anyone else. And I think that's where a lot of us struggle or have struggled is because we base what we're supposed to do and be on everyone else. And when I realized and I left my ex-husband, and I may have said this before, that he didn't want to change some things that I wanted him to change. And that was okay. He didn't have to. He didn't have to. He didn't want to. And that's okay. That's his choice. It's not my place to force him. But I had to leave because I didn't want that. I didn't want that. I didn't want to resent him. So I either had to accept it or realize that I couldn't. There was only those two choices. And for me, I didn't accept it. So I had to choose me and go. But it wasn't about him. It wasn't about he wasn't good enough. It wasn't about he this, he that. It was just someone else could have been placed in my place as his wife, and he could have made them happy forever. It was no reflection of his worth or anything about him. It was about me. Sometimes when we choose ourselves in life and we decide the circumstances that we're in is not what we want, we have a choice to just leave instead of saying they're doing me wrong, this is them doing this, blah, blah, carrying on. It's kind of like we have to decide accept it or leave. And I know. People are going to be like, come, it's not that easy. And I get that. It's not that easy. It's not easy. Nothing worth easy is worth doing. We all know that. But that's your choices. Because complaining about it isn't going to change them. I promise you. As a as a woman who has complained about the same thing for 10 plus years, it does not change because you talk about it or complain about it to them about it over and over. It doesn't. And that's true not even to other people, just other people, it's to yourself. It's not until that person or you decide that you wanna make that change because that pain of dealing with that problem or that thing becomes so big that you're just like, "All right, I'm changing it." But it's your own journey. It's not anyone else's. You can't force anyone else to go down a journey you want them to be. And I know I'm preaching so much here, but I have so many thoughts about as I go on this self-discovery journey and I'm working on myself. I'm just very reflective on all of the times I could have just been such a better partner if I would have understood myself better. And I think when we hustle and bustle in life and we're just going through the motions, we keep ourselves in the loops. There would be times that my ex-husband would be like, you never sit down. You get home, you never sit down. It'd be like morning gyms, then I'm at the office, then I'm grocery store. I'd be blocking out my entire day, cooking dinner, cleaning the house, get my outfit for the next morning, do my meal prep. I was just booking up all of my time and I felt so productive, but I also realized it gave me no time to self-reflect, which is probably what I wanted, but it gave me so much time to be irritated on a dime because I was just going through these motions and distracting all of my time and energy for what I really needed to think about, and that was me. Am I happy in this? Is this what I want? Is this what I want for my life? Is this what I'm doing? And not him and not our marriage, just me. Just me. Was I happy? Why did I have to block every single moment of my time with productivity? Why did I have to be constantly busy? Because I had to show the world that I was worthy. Look at me doing all these things. Look at this, climbing the corporate ladder. Look at me at the gym at 7 a.m. Look at me. Like in my head, what was I trying to prove? Look at me being this great wife, cooking dinner. Look at me fitting everything into this day. And those things are great. Don't get me wrong. I'm very proud at all of the time management skills that I acquired in that time in my life. But at the end of the day, I have to face the truth that I was running from dealing with how I felt about myself. Oh, that's hard to say. And I know not all of us get to that place where we can self-reflect, or we do, but it's painful. And I realized as I was running around, once I got to Tennessee through all of this, I was so messy because I let's just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. It was like the first time I didn't feel like I was occupying so much of my time with this crazy routine. I really had to lean in the silence, so I had to be messy because I had to find things to do with my time. I just had no idea. I just had this new freedom and I didn't know what to do with it. But I I still wanted not to self-reflect. I had some really, really low times sitting in my mind, and I each time I had those moments, I got messier because I didn't like looking at myself that closely because it's so hard to be real to yourself. But I know it was necessary because if you've sat alone with your thoughts at any point in time, you know what I'm talking about. If you let go of what you feel about external things in your life, your friends, your family, you can dig and understand why certain things hurt things so much, like why your feelings are hurt about so much. It's really wild for me to even think like this, but I remember even a time, and I don't even know how to get this vulnerable, but rejection has been something that I think about. And I realize that a lot of us have a fear of rejection in some form. And I don't just mean in a romantic way. Keeps it stuff that keeps us applying for jobs or taking on new opportunities. And my piece of rejection, I realize, is that even though I'm the one that left, I felt like him not changing and doing those things that I like drinking a beer right in front of me after we had a discussion about something was like a rejection of my feelings. Like he was almost to be like, you just poured your heart out. You just cried to me, but we'll worry about that later. I'm having a beer. And that felt like a rejection. And that's why it hurt so much. It wasn't because he was drinking a beer. It wasn't because it was, I mean, it was because I felt like I had been vulnerable and told him what I needed. And he was rejecting and carrying on with what he wanted to do. And again, he had every right to do what he wanted to do. But I internalized it as a rejection. And that made me feel less than. And that made me, and then it's just this whole spiral and and there's this whole path of why did I feel rejected and why am I wounded with rejection and what in my life when I was younger made me feel like I would be rejected and I don't like how this feels. That was all me. Like he wasn't like, "Oh, look at this. I hope she feels rejected from her childhood wounds at this time when she got on the bus and she didn't know who to sit by." That's not what he was thinking. He wasn't thinking that at all. He was just it was me, but I didn't know it then. I just saw him doing wrong, and he was just enjoying a cold beer. And it was me not knowing what I needed to let go of and what I needed to work on myself. So, I'm saying all this to say that sometimes looking at ourselves in the mirror and realizing why things trigger us or hurt us the way they do is the best way to live a happier life because it doesn't feel like everyone's against you. You realize that no one's doing anything most of the time to intentionally hurt you. They're just doing what they do. They're just being who they are, and how you view it is your reality. I viewed it as he's rejecting me. He viewed it as he's having a cold beer. Very completely different realities. Uh, and they can both be true. Or in my mind, that was true, but really was it? That's not what he intended to do. I know that he cared and loved me. It just wasn't for us. And I didn't know how to communicate where I was in my life. Like where I was in my life was not in line with knowing the things that I know now. So if you're struggling in any way or any part of your life, and you're trying to understand why so many things are drowning you or hurting you, it's really deeper than just what you think it is. If you start going down the path and asking yourself questions of why you feel that way, you're going to learn a lot about yourself and how to not be so hurt the next time around. I promise you. I promise you. There's a book I need to recommend, and now I might get the title wrong, but and I'll put it on my website. But it's a website, wanderingthewildmess.com. And it's the art of being disliked. Or no, sorry, the courage to be disliked. And it talks all about those kinds of thoughts. And it's very like philosophical, but it's just such a good listen. If you kind of love this idea of understanding more about your own thoughts and emotions and how they impact your life and reality and all the things, it's big into that. So, again, this is just me trying to kind of help you come into 2025 in a different mindset and understand we don't fix like we're we can't fix. I'm a fixer upper. If there ever was one, but I can only fix myself. And I'm a work in progress as we all are, but we cannot fix anyone else. And once we acknowledge that fixing sometimes comes with a lot of tears or a lot of it's sometimes difficult. I know that we only have the toolkit that works for us. So when we're trying to fix something, our toolkit only works for us. I don't have the toolkit to fix someone else as much as I want to. And as much as I've tried, I've really been the kind of person that wanted to fix everyone else, but I know now that I can't. But what I can do to fuel that part in my soul is I can tell you about the tools that work for me so that you can find those tools within you and we can guide each other on this way to pick up the right tools to figure out how to work on the things that are holding you back from being your best self or living your best life or taking the chances on yourself or starting over because you want to, but you'll feel like you can't. All of those things are just your own limiting beliefs and they're not there to serve you. So you just have to get the tools out so that you can fix those things. First, you have to find them to fix them. It's a whole process, but we're wandering this wild mess together and it'll be a great time, a great time. But I'm sure confident that you can do it. And that's why I'm here to just put a little bit of this into your world. And I also just want to say, as we're wrapping up the end of the year, I appreciate every last one of you for being here and listening and spending your time. This is definitely crazy for me to think about just starting this podcast. It's been so therapeutic for me. As if you've been on this journey with me, you know this thing has been all over, but you have been the constant. You're the reason I'm doing this outside of myself. Okay, I'm doing it for me, my little fixer upper, but what I would hope that the output of this can help you. So it means the world that you're listening because I feel seen, which I was really afraid to be for a long time. So if I can give you anything, it would be to let go of your fears, the things that are stopping you for doing the things you want to do, and just be who you want to be. It's about to be a whole new year, a whole new you. They say that can happen anytime. It doesn't take a new year, but why not? Why not this year? All right. So I hope that story that just shows you that starting over and figuring out your life at any age, at any time is possible. That's what I want for you. So thank you for listening to Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan. You matter.